There's a lot of information out there related to climate change and pollution, and some of it is fake, some of it is true, some of it is very apocalyptic, and some not at all. And there's also plenty that just ignore climate change. This video essay is supposed to be a very brief, informative video, and it aims to inform and provoke the audience. By no means this will cover everything, because otherwise this would be a 5-hour long video essay on YouTube instead. But there are a few things that I would like to talk about. These are the severity of the plastic pollution, the effects of plastic pollution, and a few suggestions on how to handle plastic pollution. Let's start with the first one. The severity of plastic pollution. Generally, it's agreed upon that between 12 and 13 million tons enter the ocean each year. But that's not all of it, because that's just the amount that ends up in sea, and not the amount that ends up in landfills, recycling centers, just general land, space, or incineration stations. It is very difficult to estimate a very accurate amount of plastic in the ocean. Some say 50 million metric tons, and others use different ways of expressing the pollution. For example, they say that there are 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic in the ocean. More worryingly, not all plastic pollution floats. A majority is actually sprinkled over the ocean's floor, and it has been discovered that plastic only ever breaks down into smaller pieces, not into their building blocks like most other things do. This makes that plastic quite literally never really disappears. It just becomes smaller. And while plastic breaks down into smaller pieces, it leaks chemicals into the environment. These chemicals then enter the food chain, and because of that, plastic has already been found in human fetuses, human blood, human lungs, and even on the planet Mars. This shows that it's near impossible to avoid plastic at all nowadays. Plastic pollution really occurs throughout the whole society. There's a lot of fabrics that use synthetic fibers, and when these are washed, they leak more plastic into the environment. Things such as nylon stockings, football jerseys, a lot of teddies. Each time they wash, they release more and more plastic. And the problem as well is that a lot of products such as guppy bags and Cora balls that are supposed to catch those fibers are not perfect and do not catch all fibers. Of course, clothing is not the only place that plastic fibers occur. Food packaging, agriculture, there's a lot of different places that plastic occurs. Plastic is the standard of anything in society nowadays. And stores such as the Disney Store and Penny's have the power and money to overnight change all their synthetic fibers to natural fibers, but they won't because there is still money to be made in synthetic fibers. Now, let's talk about the effects of plastic pollution. As discussed earlier, when plastic breaks down, it releases chemicals into the environment, which then enter the food chain. These chemicals are known to cause organ damage, hormonal disruptions, they affect the reproductive system, stunt growth, and attack immune systems. That is why men today have half the sperm count that their grandfathers used to have. These effects would just be exaggerated as future generations are born. That is, however, if there is still a future for them to live in. The ocean is known to provide a large share of the world's oxygen, but this only happens through diverse collaboration and network of species that live in the ocean. Species such as algae, plankton, whales, dolphins play a crucial part in this ecosystem. Some of them get constricted into plastic in the ocean and slowly suffocate, and others eat it and slowly fill their stomachs with plastic, which will also ultimately kill them. This, on top of the overfishing, dolphin hunting, whale hunting, might lead to a lack of oxygen to support all life on the planet. And I'm sure that this is not even all of the effects of plastic. And I'm fairly certain this is not even all of the effects of plastic pollution. But just to list them all: dangerous chemicals entering the food chain, stunted growth, fertility issues, immune issues, organ damage, suffocation of marine life, suffocation of all life. And finally, I do want to go over how we can combat this apocalyptic future. Most people seem to think that the problem actually is with single-use plastics, and that's partially true, but I would argue that the problem lies with all plastic. I would argue that everything at some point in their existence will become rubbish. Therefore, at some point it will be discarded, and it will either end up in the environment, or in a landfill, or just be incinerated. And none of these are really that great options. Now, some will say, what about recycling? And the answer to that is only about 10% of all plastic is actually being recycled. And companies making plastic knew all along that recycling was never going to be the answer to plastic pollution. There is a varying degree in how problematic plastic is, as some companies do have set up systems to have their products 100% recycled with a free post address, but that's more the exception than the rule. Ideally, the best way to combat plastic pollution is to boycott all new plastics. Boycott cola bottles, cola cans, as they have a thin layer of plastic inside of them. Boycott the Disney store, most of pennies, but realistically, that is not possible, of course. People aren't just going to give up something out of nowhere. Very often, there is also not even an alternative that doesn't use plastic. And then sectors such as the medical sector rely on plastic to keep things sterile before use. So obviously, a boycott is not really going to help anyone. For some, cutting out plastic is almost impossible because they have a very tight budget, and often the product that doesn't use plastic is more expensive. And that is probably also where the solution lies. If there's no money to be made anymore from plastic in any capacity, companies will stop using plastic in their products at all. Governments were to subsidize products without plastic and tax products with plastic, then I'm sure companies will be very quick to change their products. However, this doesn't mean that the individual is completely free to buy whatever they want with disregard of whether it's plastic or not. This means that the major change isn't going to happen from the individual, but from government level and corporation level. Most importantly, the individual can spam their TDs to ban the use of plastic, especially in items that do not need it, such as clothing, toys, teddies, food packaging, and household products. Go to protests, sign petitions, send dirty plastic to your TDs, make noise as a collective, ask for a tax reduction on plastic-free products, request plastic products to be taxed more heavily. Many different ways that you could protest the use of plastic. Climate change and pollution require genuine cultural change, not just individual change.